Hi, this is Susie Boss from PBL World, the last day of this amazing conference. And I'm here with John Mergendoller, Executive Director of the Buck Institute for Education. And John just kicked off day 5 here with the keynote where he laid out his thinking about a new gold standard for project-based learning. So John, I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you, why does PBL need a gold standard? What's the thinking behind this whole initiative?
Well, we actually know quite a bit about PBL. There's been 30 or 40 years of research on PBL, and we have probably 100,000, 200,000 teachers in the United States who use it daily. And because we built up a knowledge base about it, we thought it'd be useful to take a look and try and set some guideposts for what really effective practice is. And some of that comes from what teachers have learned from doing it with students. Some of it comes from what educational researchers have done. So we wanted to address PBL and try and identify the things that really make a difference in student learning. And we call that the gold standard. That doesn't mean that every time someone does PBL, they hit the gold standard, but it's something that you shoot for, that you want to accomplish. And over your teaching career, you get better, you get closer.
And so there's a whole, you described the aspirational piece of this, that this is a gold standard, not for teachers to feel like, oh, I'll never live up to that, but it's something to aim for. It's something to aim for.
I mean, if you think about growth mindset and how students have the opportunity to grow and learn as through their effort. I mean, I think it's the same thing for teachers, that comes a growth mindset for making my own practice better.
Okay. And it was great to hear your kind of your journey, your research going back to kind of the origins of PBL and reflecting on some of the great thinkers over the years. It was pretty fun to hear Renaissance roots. And
yeah, no, that's a very interesting claim that PBL actually came from the experience of training Renaissance architects. In Italy, there was a revolt among students who were sitting at the foot of the master who was talking about how to build buildings. And they said, we want to build models. We want to be apprentices. We want to get out of this classroom and into the world doing authentic work.
Right. Which leads naturally to the way you're thinking now about inquiry as being sustained. And I guess I would like to inquire more about your thinking about inquiry, because, you know, one way of thinking about inquiry is that you are, it's an opportunity for students to put on the disciplinary lenses, to learn in the way that experts do. And it takes time to do that, and it also takes particular focus to learn to inquire the way that an architect does, or a historian, all those things. So can you tell us why you're kind of rethinking the role of inquiry, or perhaps redefining in this gold standard what inquiry is all about and how it, you know, why it needs to be sustained?
Well, we've always emphasized inquiry, and from the beginning, in-depth inquiry was a key element in what we thought effective project-based learning was. And we were trying to make a distinction between activities that are more superficial and a longer-term sustained engagement with a question, which generates other questions, which you follow. And implicit was the idea that this takes time. You don't really complete inquiry in 45 minutes. No. But it was not explicitly stated. So by calling it sustained inquiry rather than in-depth inquiry, I think it conveys the same basic idea of the importance of inquiry, but it specifies that this takes a little while to accomplish, and there needs to be time for students to really dig into what they're studying. They need to perhaps hit some obstacles and have to think about how they're going to resolve them, to show the grit and persistence that so many people are talking about now as success factors. So we're suggesting that rather than calling that element in-depth inquiry, that we call attention to the time element and say it's sustained inquiry.
Okay. And another element you're going to emphasize, it sounds like, in the gold standard is authenticity, real-world projects. Do you want to talk about kind of how you've come around to thinking that authenticity needs to be kind of bolted in?
Well, for anybody who has been to PBL World, in the last 3 years, they have run into Sam Seidel talking about authenticity, and of course, his keynotes are on the PBL World website and on YouTube. And I guess he has just made me a believer that although authenticity has been implied in our previous writing, that we need to call it front and center. And that is one of the key things that distinguishes a project-based from a traditional approach. And if you look at the literature on student motivation, it's very clear that students in general are more engaged in doing projects that are meaningful to them, that reflect the real world and suggest their learning skills they can use later, and that affect their own lives. And those are 3 characteristics of authenticity.
Okay, all right. And again, these connections from one element to the other, I mean, authentic projects and authentic inquiry go hand in hand as well. So if you're inquiring, you're inquiring not in a make-believe way, but in an authentic way, using tools of discipline.
Yeah, I mean, the science educators like to say, we're not learning about science, we're doing science.
Right.
And it's the same idea.
Right, so that's exciting. Great. And then a couple of other things you're rethinking, or for those who know the PBL 8 Elements graphic, it's so visible on the BIE site, and anyone who's been through a workshop, PBL 101 workshop, knows those elements really well. You're kind of rethinking what goes in the middle of that graphic.
Right. In 2010, we established that graphic. And at that point, PBL was still somewhat questionable among educators, or maybe the public educators, I think. And also the concern about 21st century skills or developing workplace skills or the skills that are needed for lifelong success was not taken for granted. I think now, with the adoption of the Common Core and with the incorporation of 21st century skills or competencies into just daily dialogue among teachers and administrators, that those 2 goals of project-based learning don't have to be called out quite so stridently. And what that does, if it's not that we would be neglecting the idea that projects ought to deal with important content and ought to teach students how to think and collaborate, it's just that maybe we don't have to put it at the center. Maybe we can put it on the sides or something. Yeah, imply it more. And take that room and bring the teacher back into the picture. You know, I mean, we didn't mean to push the teacher to the side, but if you look at the elements, it's about the project, not the teacher. And the project is only going to succeed if the teacher is there, and the teacher is managing, guiding, helping, suggesting. So I think maybe it would be better to focus on 2 elements of effective project-based learning: the role of the teacher, what I would call project-based teaching, and the role of the team, the student team that is accomplishing the project. So we're proposing that we bring those 2 elements back. And so we still have 8 elements,
right?
But 3 of the elements have changed,
and
the other 5 have remained the same.
Right. Okay. And it's interesting that as you were sharing this morning, you really want community feedback on your thinking on this gold standard, and created a hashtag, gold standard PBL.
Right.
How is that feedback going to be, how's that going to inform this whole process? You know, how will you kind of make sense of that and sort it out, and kind of what happens next?
Well, the first part's the easy part. I mean, we clearly want to hear from as many people as possible. We want our teachers to give us their thumbs up, thumbs down, questions, suggestions, just the whole. We'd like to maybe do a critical fringe protocol if we could, but that's the idea. We want what makes sense, what doesn't. We want to hear from administrators, we want to hear from parents, we want to hear from people that are engaged in any way with education in school. And I think what the first step will be to respond to this running dialogue. So we want to get the tweets in, and we'll send some tweets back to what do you mean by this? Or, I think that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, try and make it a two-way We'll also be having some face-to-face meetings with people, trying to get their opinions that way. How we're going to sift and sort, I'm not sure. I mean, at the end of the day, BIE staff and board will put their heads together and say, here's our best go at this based on everything we've heard and everything we've read.
Sure, sure. And you're really inviting global feedback, right?
Absolutely.
Yes.
I mean, PBL is a global phenomenon, and we want to hear from people in China and Singapore, Mexico City,
everywhere. Right. And you know, one other comment I just wanted to have you elaborate on this morning. You made kind of a passing reference to how in 2010 PBL, you had a bit of a voice in education, but now PBL is really a movement. There's really been a shift. And I wonder if you want to talk about the energy behind PBL, what you're noticing and where this might be going.
Well, I think, you know, a little empirical data on this. I have a Google each week tells me how many times PBL has newly appeared on the web, and I used to get maybe 1 or 2 links a week. You know, I must get 25 to 30 a week, and they're often newspaper articles about schools implementing this or that.
Sure.
PBL. So the presence of PBL in American education is very different now. 4 years have made a huge difference. And I think that's because, you know, when teachers experience PBL with their students, they don't want to go back. Right? It's a very satisfying way to teach.
Yeah. And there's even research from West Virginia research back that up. Teachers
several studies will show that.
Yes, teachers actually like their jobs more.
Yeah.
Despite how hard sometimes the work is to get used to PBL and design great projects and all of that requires a shift for a lot of teachers. But once they do it,
right,
they are sold.
The work becomes more fulfilling.
Yeah, which is a really exciting outcome. You know, we talk about student engagement in PBL, but teacher engagement is equally important.
Right. No, absolutely. And I think we're at a perfect storm. I mean, the Common Core state standards and the new next gen science standards, all of those have elements that PBL is the perfect approach to accomplish the goals that are being set out.
Great. Well, that may be where we close today. That's a pretty optimistic point to stop. But I just wonder if you have any last reflections on, you know, last day of PBL World and all the amazing energy and ideas and folks who have gathered here all week.
Well, it just, you know, every year it gets better, and I've had so many wonderful conversations. I hope that we can, we're talking about expanding this regionally. We're bursting at the seams here, and we don't really want to change the venue because it's such a wonderful place to meet.
Right.
But we're thinking maybe of regional PBL worlds in partnership with the school districts we work with. So maybe a Mid-Atlantic PBL world another time.
Okay.
Midwestern.
All right. So that conversation just kind of keeps growing, doesn't it? Yeah,
we want to get as many people into the tent as possible.
That's great. It's wonderful. Great. Well, John, thanks so much for sharing your great thinking. And, you know, it's just exciting to hear how at BIE you're using reflection, iteration, constant improvement, just exactly the same way that we want to be happening with students in the classroom. It just seems like it's a way of approaching the world. Makes sense for all of us.
I think we do, and thank you very much for taking the time to talk.
Great. Thanks.